Hello, BookTube. Hope you're all doing well. First things first, I need to apologize for my voice. I came down with a bad bug a few days ago. I can barely talk at all. It was the first day in a while. I think people can actually understand what I'm saying. So we better do this wrap up now while we can. The month of November, of course, was my favorite reading event of the year, Nonfiction November. Nonfiction is by far my favorite genre, hands down. I've been reading it my whole life before I became a big fiction reader on top of that. And heading into that last month, I knew exactly what I wanted to read for the month, these three books. First, I'll tell you right off the bat, I gave them all like the highest score I could. You know, in my past videos too, so I never gave a grade for any of the books I've read, and that's intentional because like a lot of times, look down the line, I see a book a little differently and I like it better, then I get change the score. So I never save the rating I give it on the video, even though I do actually, especially since on the Fable app you can give the half score ratings, and now they've upgraded to quarter star ratings, so you can really get specific with the ratings too. So for nonfiction, these three nonfiction books, I gave them the highest grade I could, which is 4.5. I was like, I never give a nonfiction book a perfect 5 stars. That they're all like as well written, as well told as they can be. Like these authors are like reporting history and telling a narrative to us. So it's like, like they're reporting history too. They didn't like write history themselves. So I may be a little picky here, but like, so for that, the highest score I can give a nonfiction book is 4.5. And I had 3 books from last month. I gave them all 4.5s. So it was a very, very good month. Let's start right off with this one here. We got Henry V by Dan Jones. I tell you, I mentioned in the past like why I picked this book up, and I'll give a little rehash again. Henry V has been like stalking me the last couple months. Like back in September, I participated in the reading event Shakestember, read Shakespeare, and one of Shakespeare's plays was Henry V. I decided not to read that one for the event, but coincidentally, my favorite podcast, according to my Spotify wrap up, The Rest is History, did like some episodes about Henry V. So there's no avoiding the guy. Then in October, this book was making the rounds on BookTube. All different YouTubers I like were all talking about this and raving it as well. So couldn't escape the guy. So naturally, I had to go out and get a copy for myself and read it. Simply put, you ever heard that expression like "heavy is the head that wears the crown"? Like, good Lord, that describes this book from start to finish. Like all the chaos that comes with being king. Like, really running an empire, you got your own people ruling over, trying to take the crown from you. Then you have people around the world that you're trying to rule over who don't want to be ruled, and you got that issue. Like, good Lord, it's like running an empire and being a king is really chaotic. This story too, even like Henry V's father, like Henry IV. At one point, that guy, he was like banished from the English kingdom. He was living in France. He was supposed to live in France for 10 years. Henry IV comes back with an army to reclaim his throne. He takes the king prisoner. Like, oh Lord, like it's a whole bunch of chaos too. Like you can see, I can understand now like why a lot of nonfiction readers, history readers, also read a lot of fantasy. There's a lot of like your fantasy stories take from historical events around the world and use that in their own stories as well. Can't have one without the other. This book started off with one hell of an introduction. Starts off with like the story of like this surgeon. Like when Henry V, when he was like 16 years old, he was fighting in battle. In a brief moment, he took his visor off. He got shot in the face with an arrow. The arrow was embedded like 6 inches into his face. It's like the surgeon was summoned. I think like no pressure deal, right? Like you got like the future king of England there. You got this arrowhead embedded like 6 inches into his cheek. You got to worry about infection, the guy dying, any sort of anything that could kill him or disable him in the future, like the future king you're talking about here. That was just the opening story of the book too. And then you go over the whole history of like the predecessors, Henry afterwards. Really, like what a chaotic living it must have been back then, especially being king too. Like, this is like heavy. This is Heather. Where's the crown? I personally wouldn't want that too. There's nothing but torture from everybody. Next up, we got a little happier story. This is a Seabiscuit, An American Legend by Laura Hillenbrand. I first came across this book back in 2003, a long time ago now. There was a movie adapted from this book where you had like Charles Howard here. He was played by Jeff Bridges. Red Pollard, the jockey, was played by Tobey Maguire. It's a hell of a story. Like Charles Howard, he's from New York. This is like the year 1900. He goes out west to California because the West was expanding back then. First, he opens up a bicycle shop, and then next thing you know, he works his way into like automotives. Like he has like a Buick dealership. It's like the wave of the future, automobiles. And there's a story how he made his fortune. That early 1900s, the terrible earthquake like devastated California, and his Buicks were used as part of the recovery. So out of that chaos, he came out as one of the richest men in America. You can get a lot of this too. Like a guy over at General Motors, like he loaned this guy like an insane amount of money, and in return, he got a lifetime share in the profits of GM and stock options in the company as well. So this guy was all set. He's like a self-made, like I guess back then millionaire, but probably equivalent of a billionaire today. So of course, like what a lot of people did back then, a lot of rich men did. Like you partake in the sport of kings, horse racing, as it was called back then. And it's such a fantastic story too. Like the horse Seabiscuit. It's so funny. The story Seabiscuit's story you hear a lot of days with like even like with athletes today. It's like it's a story of like what terrible coaching can do to such talent. Like it was like Seabiscuit. Like he was kind of like a lazy horse, kind of like a prima donna. It was just like his personality, and like the original people who had him were like literally like trying to like beat him, like change his behavior, and the horse just quit on him. Robert Howard here, he had this trainer who was like the last of the old West, and so they found this. The old trainer's name was Tom Smith. They found this horse, like this old like horse whisperer type of guy. He saw something special in this horse, so they bought him, and like they needed to like essentially retrain him, like recoach him, and they found like this jockey, Red Pollard. They're an amazing story too. Like he was abandoned as a teenager. Like his family was just dead broke, and like they had no means to support him, so the family had to leave him at like a horse farm in the care of this guy as a young teenager. And it's like all three of these guys came together. It's like they're like a little perfect team. And the book's just loaded with stories too. Like back in like the early 1900s, there was like no rules in anything, so I wish like the world of jockeys was like so deadly. Like they had to keep their weight down and whatnot. So all the means that they went through to do that. In like one point, Red Pollard is suspected of doing this too. Like some of the jockeys would take a pill that contained the egg of a tapeworm. I believe this. They would take it, the tapeworm would grow in them. That's how they would lose weight. And when it got to be too much, the tapeworm was taken care of. A lot of insane stories. It was pretty sick back then. There was no rules, no protection for anybody. And what was I going to mention too? Oh, yeah, I have to backtrack a little bit. One little story I was going to mention I just found amusing too. So Charles Howard here, like he also had a little flair for showmanship too when he was selling his cars. Like, because come on, these cars are brand new. Nobody had a car. Nobody's ever driven a car. So, one of the things they would do, like if you bought a car, you get like one of his promotions, you get free driving lessons. What a novel concept. You buy a car, you teach people how to drive them, and you can maybe a lot of you can relate to this nowadays. Like if you ever bought like a new car, like nowadays, like maybe you trade in your old car in exchange for a new one. Well, that's the part of the payment for the new one. Well, in these old days, when people are buying the first car, you could actually trade in your horse for a new car. A little funny thing how things change over time. It's rather metaphorical too. You trade in your horse for a car. This is me reading in between the lines too. Like, because obviously, like you're reporting on history. Like you can only you can only fill in the lines yourself so much because these people aren't alive anymore to talk about themselves. Talk about like the bonds and the friendship that these guys had. Like I was like they were the only ones who can work this great horse and get the most out of him. Also, one story that really stuck with me to show you how like their working relationship and their friendship was tested when Red Pollard here got caught in a lie. or something he was holding. Probably in addition to being a jockey, he was also like a prize fighter. And what a violent world like back then. And so they're in one race. It's a big race. Seabiscuit is like a rising horse, and they lost the race. Like apparently, another horse came up on the side. People looking at Pollard like, how could you let that happen? You didn't even see the horse coming. Turns out he couldn't, because all those years as a prize fighter, like he went blind in one eye, and he kept this from Charles all the way, through their whole relationship. And then it cost them a race, and in the end, they still stuck with each other because out of friendship, and also because he was really the only guy who knew how to get the most out of the horse. Little stories like that really stick with me too. All right, folks. Now, the third book I read in Nonfiction November. I should point out, I actually started this one in October, and then I finally finished it this month. It's called The Secret Life of Houdini. I call it The Making of America's First Superhero. Personally, I hate that subtitle. It makes no sense, and it's just silly. But you know what? That little simple title and marketing trick gets people to look into Houdini's life in this time. Then I say it's a great title, but I guess it serves its purpose. Like I said, as I say in the thumbnail of this video, this book actually originally it started off. I was going to read this for spooky season. I thought I didn't have enough time. Then it crossed over into Nonfiction November. Did two things. Then, as it turns out, there's a third event that this also qualified for too. It's called Dr. November, where people read spy novels. And I'm kind of jumping around here, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit, start over, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. First, start off with why I want to read this for spooky season. Well, first of all, just being in his line of work as magician, like he had a very spooky character. You know, it was kind of a gimmick, in addition to being his natural personality. So it was perfect to read for spooky season. Also, Houdini had passed away on Halloween. We'll get back to this, a little more details of that in just a moment. And like I said, so Nonfiction November, we got this, but also Dr. November, the spy novel. It turns out, and we're only speculating here, there's no definitive proof, but it turns out Harry Houdini was believed to have been a spy for the U.S. government, like leading up to World War One. Because I think he travels the world. He meets with all like these royal people, sees things that ordinary citizens don't get access to. So it's kind of believed that like while he was overseas, he was just not like official like an agent or anything, but like I guess essentially he would, if he saw anything, he would report it back to the government, to the U.S. government, to let you know how things were working around the world. Did that amount to anything big? You know, we'll never know. We can only speculate. Either way, he traveled the world and supposedly reported back what he saw. This particular book was loaded with information. It's like over 1,000. Excuse me. Rather, it's about 500 pages, and like the two authors went through like thousands of documents. Like their purpose was to get as much detail about his life and people he met and put it into a book. So it's that type of read. It's a hell of a read. It was fascinating. And any story Houdini. Talk about like the crazy tricks that he used to do. A lot of people today, I've heard like from magicians, like a lot of people are picky, saying that, you know, Houdini, he really wasn't a magician because he was really known for more of his stunts. And think about that. That's actually that's not people just looking to be annoying and like contradict you or anything. That actually has a lot of merit to it. Just think of Houdini's like his escapes, like all his stunts. They really were stunts. They really weren't so much magic tricks. I think one of his most famous stunts, he jumped off of a bridge. I apologize, I'm still a little sick, so my brain's a little foggy. I think it was in Pittsburgh. In the dead of winter, he stood up on this really high bridge. He's in his shackles. Imagine there's like thousands of people on the bridge watching him about to jump off. And the river's completely frozen. They carved a hole into the ice. He jumped off the bridge, went through the hole in the ice, which was impressive enough, because apparently the hole wasn't that big. And while he was under the water, the freezing water, and he escaped the shackles. And then he was supposed to emerge up, but he couldn't find the hole to get back through the ice. And he always claimed that the spirit of his mother like guided him toward the hole. Now, whether that was in his head or maybe it really happened, we don't know the details, but that is what happened. Whatever the cause was, we don't know. And I mentioned Houdini died on Halloween night. around this time in the 1900s too, like there's a lot of like spiritualism was like psychics that were really like becoming trendy and very popular with people. So naturally, you get a lot of con artists who were taking advantage of people looking to seek out their deceased relatives. And so Houdini, he this is where it ties in too, because like like you tell like he wanted to believe in like spiritualism, like an afterlife, and so he had a lot of problems with like these con artists preying on like these grieving people. Like he actually offered a reward, like if you could prove to him that you were a real psychic, like he'd give you like a fortune, a life changing amount of money. But if he proved you were a fraud, he outed you and completely ruined you. And like one of the people he had outed as a fraud was the wife of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, like the man who created Sherlock Holmes, one of the most recognized characters in the world. Here's where we get to the spooky part. So leading up to Harry's death, he was assaulted by a fan, or fan or a crazy person, whoever it was. Even that's up to debate for two. Like this person who assaulted him, like what were their motives exactly, or were they just nuts? Nobody knows for sure, really. But nevertheless, he was assaulted. And personally, what I think would happen too, this guy punched Houdini in the stomach. Like one of Houdini's tricks was like, because he was such an incredible athlete too. That's what people didn't know about him. And he was in such great shape. He would like tense up his abs, and he would challenge like the biggest guy in the audience to punch him in the stomach. It'd be like punching a wall. Like he would stand there, your fist would just bounce off his stomach, and like he went, and like people just look at him like it was insane. So anyway, this guy ran up, he punched Houdini in the stomach, like when he was off guard, and what ended up happening was Houdini's appendix burst, and he ended up dying from the poisoning. Now here's where the spooky part comes in. As Houdini was dying, he gave a message to his wife. Now, after his death, his wife continued to hold seances to try and communicate with his spirit. If that spirit recited this message, she would know that it truly was Harry. Sadly, Harry spirit was never known to have communicated with his wife. Instead, there you go. Like I said, spooky season, nonfiction November, and Dr. November. All three turn out to be in this one book. All right, folks. I rambled on a lot more than I wanted to, but it happens when you're a little sick. You not really sure what you're saying or where you're going. So now that November is over with, I got some December reading to do. I found a couple of good ones too. I'll tell you more all about them at the end of the month, especially when I'm finished them. I came across this for a little Christmas read. It was on like a table in Barnes & Noble. It sounded interesting. The Spectacular by Fiona Davis. Especially it's like a mystery novel. Like a woman in 1956. She's 19 years old. She became a Radio City Rockette. There you go. The Rockettes, they're always synonymous with Christmas. And at the time, there was like, excuse me, and there was like a bomber in New York at the time. It sounds like I just read the back of it. It sounded like an interesting novel, Christmas related. So I picked that up. I'll let you know how that is at the end of the month. And this one, this I'm going to make a whole video on its own because it deserves it, because it's very layered. We have like the classic story of Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I'll hold that up. Put on the lights to make sure the color will pop on the video for you. Looking nice. There's a little Peter there at the hook. Captain Hook's ship right there. You see it too, like by Peter's hand, there's a little flicker of light. I think we can assume that's Tinkerbell. I heard a podcast recently about J.M. Barrie's life, and oh my god, like I've never read the book before. I've only seen the Disney movie, but you put the connections of J.M. Barrie's life and you see how he used them to write this story, like what influenced what. It's like absolutely tragic. Like I said, I won't go into it here. I'll make a little video on its own. I'll get right back to you. Nice depressing little holiday read for you. Can't be too happy. Anyway, hope all of you are staying healthy and not sick. I'll see you guys at the end of the month. Have a good one.